If I told you that Beethoven, the man who composed the sweeping transcendent Ode to Joy, also sat down to write a multi-part vocal harmony entirely about feces, you'd probably think I was, like, making it up.
Right. I mean, it completely contradicts the image of the pristine, untouched classical genius. We tend to project this intense reverence onto the past.
We really do. When you picture the ancient Romans or, medieval scholars, it is just so easy to imagine these impossibly stern marble statues just staring blankly into the distance.
Yeah, speaking only in high-minded philosophy or Stoic ideals.
Exactly. But welcome to today's deep dive where we are going to completely dismantle that illusion. We have a set of sources today that proves the ancients were just as petty, profound, and, well, wonderfully messily human as you and I are today.
And we're working from a surprisingly rich, albeit unconventional, source text for this. It's a comprehensive Wikipedia list of Latin phrases beginning with the letter C.
Which sounds dry, but it's really not.
No, not at all. Our mission is to basically rescue Latin from the dusty halls of academia. We're bypassing all the dry legal jargon to extract the most fascinating, hilarious, and timeless nuggets of human nature hidden within this specific slice of the alphabet.
It's essentially a massive hysterical rabbit hole. And honestly, the sheer level of snark is incredible.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right out of the gate, this list proves Latin was the ultimate language for delivering absolute scorching burns.
It really was.
Which brings us back to Beethoven and the phrase Cacatum non est pictum.
Right, which translates quite literally to, that's shat, not painted.
It's just such a visceral insult. And what's fascinating is the timeline of how this phrase was weaponized. It was a known Latin burn that classical composers apparently found hilarious.
Yeah, both Joseph Haydn and Ludwig van Beethoven actually wrote vocal canons based entirely on the text Cacatum non est pictum.
Which is just wild to think about.
But it didn't stop as an inside joke among musicians either. It crossed over into legitimate art criticism.
Oh, right, the British painter. Exactly. In the 1820s and 1830s, contemporary critics hurled this exact Latin phrase at J.M.W. Turner. They were specifically targeting his painting Regulus.
I mean, they looked at a painting by one of history's great masters of light and atmosphere and essentially published a review saying, that is feces, not art.
It really completely shifts how you view the language.
Yeah.
Latin wasn't just a sacred, untouchable relic. It was a living tool for art critics to blow off steam and, frankly, publicly mock people.
It reveals a society that was highly observant of human flaws and highly motivated to call them out. We see that same critical eye applied to literature, right? With the phrase Cacoethes scribendi.
Yes, which translates to an insatiable desire to write.
Today, we might romanticize the idea of writing constantly. We think of the creative muse descending, driving an author to fill pages and pages. But the ancients viewed it through a much, much harsher lens.
They absolutely did. The phrase derives from the Roman poet Juvenal in his Satires. And, he wasn't praising prolific writers. He was describing an incurable itch.
An itch?
Yeah. In fact, if you look at the medical context, the Greek root Cacoethes literally means a malignant disease.
Juvenal was diagnosing people with a malignant disease of the pen. That is amazing. It's the ancient Roman equivalent of someone who just cannot stop posting online.
The eternal reply guys.
Exactly. You see these reply guys on social media who have to inject their opinion into every single conversation, regardless of whether they have anything valuable to say. Juvenal was looking around Rome, seeing the exact same impulse and labeling it an illness.
It's so relatable. Juvenal's frustration highlights how deeply annoying the Romans could be by their own society's excesses.
Yeah.
But when it came to insults, the absolute sharpest ones were reserved for politics.
Always.
The historian Tacitus provides perhaps the ultimate professional takedown with the phrase Capax imperii nisi imperasset.
This was applied to the Roman Emperor Galba, right? It translates to, and I love this, capable of imperial power if only he had not held it.
Yes. Tacitus captures an entire tragic arc of leadership in just 5 words. Galba was highly respected before taking the throne. He was a successful general, a stern disciplinarian, and widely considered the ideal candidate to stabilize Rome.
Right. It's the ancient Roman equivalent of the Peter Principle. They were entirely capable of being the boss right up until the moment they actually became the boss and ruined everything.
The brevity of the Latin is what makes the insult hit with such force. It doesn't waste time detailing Galba's specific administrative failures or how his rigid nature alienated the army.
It just cuts to the chase.
Exactly. It simply presents the paradox. The illusion of competence destroyed by the reality of power.
So if the ancients were this cynical, I mean, if they were surrounded by bad art, reply guys with the disease of the pen, and leaders failing upward, it makes perfect sense that they had to build incredibly robust systems to navigate that society.
You don't build a complex legal and logical framework if you trust everybody implicitly. You build it because you know human nature is slippery, self-serving, and often deceptive.
Yeah, they needed mechanics to find the truth in a totally chaotic world. Here's where it gets really interesting, because that brings us to the famous investigative phrase, cui bono,
Who benefits?
or literally, good for whom.
Right, and it remains the cornerstone of criminal investigation today. When a crime or a political scandal occurs, the immediate first step is to trace the advantage.
Follow the money, basically.
Exactly. The philosopher Seneca used a very similar variation, qui prodest, meaning for whom it advances. If an event advances someone's social or financial position, you have your primary suspect.
And the flip side of that concept is cui malo, bad for whom. By establishing whose life gets noticeably worse because of an event, you can quickly eliminate suspects. It is a brilliant way to cut through the noise of an investigation.
It really is. It's pure deductive logic.
But I have to push back on another famous legal phrase from this list, caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware.
Ah, yes. A foundational concept of commerce, dictating that the purchaser is responsible for checking whether the goods suit their needs.
Right, but without a modern regulatory agency, doesn't let the buyer beware basically mean it's a scammer's market. Like, it sounds like an ancient get-out-of-jail-free card.
How do you mean?
Well, if I buy a broken chariot from a merchant and they just shrug and say, caveat emptor, what mechanism forces them to actually care about the quality of their goods? It just seems incredibly one-sided.
It's very easy to look at it that way from a modern perspective, assuming it was just the Wild West where the loudest, most deceptive merchant won. But the sources provide the crucial counterbalance. Caveat venditor.
Let the seller beware.
Exactly.
But how did they actually enforce that? Without a better business bureau, isn't caveat venditor just a polite suggestion?
Not at all. The legal framework itself forced the seller to take responsibility. Caveat venditor discouraged the sale of items of unreasonable quality by establishing liability.
Oh, so they could actually be held liable.
Yes. If a merchant deliberately hid a latent flaw, say a disease in livestock or a structural crack in a piece of equipment, the legal system allowed the buyer to hold them accountable for the deception.
Oh, wow.
They recognize market balance. The buyer cannot be willfully blind, but the seller is legally prohibited from being actively deceitful. Both parties had skin in the game.
That makes a lot more sense. It wasn't just anarchy, it was a system of mutual liability, and this obsession with building protective frameworks extended beyond the marketplace into the realm of logic itself.
Right, they were constantly trying to defend against flawed human reasoning.
A perfect example from the list is cum hoc ergo propter hoc. With this, therefore, on account of this.
The classic logical fallacy of confusing correlation with causation.
Yep. Just because the rooster crows before sunrise doesn't mean the rooster caused the sun to rise.
Exactly. By explicitly naming this fallacy, the Romans were building a defense mechanism against bad logic. They understood that just because two things happen simultaneously, it does not mean one caused the other.
It's a protection against manipulation.
Absolutely. If you don't have a term for that cognitive trap, it is incredibly easy for a populace to be manipulated by politicians or merchants, linking unrelated events to push an agenda.
Here is where the pursuit of truth gets incredibly tricky, though. You can have all the logic in the world, you can understand motives perfectly with cui bono, but sometimes the vessel of language itself sets a trap for you.
Oh, the phonetic trap.
Yes. We have to break down the phrase, cain nero magna bella persica.
This is a brilliant example of how elusive meaning can be. What's fascinating here is how comprehension is entirely dependent on context, geography, and the slow drift of time.
Because, as a Latin sentence, cain nero magna bella persica is grammatically flawless. It translates to, tell, O Nero, of the great wars of Persia.
It is an epic, poetic invocation. You are commanding an ancient emperor to sing of glorious sweeping battles.
But if you walk up to a modern Italian person, specifically someone speaking the dialect of Rome today, and you utter those exact same syllables, the meaning fractures entirely.
It really does. It's so funny.
Let's actually break down how this works phonetically, because the mechanism of the trap is hilarious. In the modern Roman dialect, cain means dog.
Right. And Nero means black.
Exactly. Magna sounds exactly like mangia, which means eats.
Then Bella translates to beautiful, and Persica is a peach.
So you think you are channeling the spirit of the Roman Empire, but the person listening hears, a black dog eats a beautiful peach.
It perfectly illustrates why the truth requires constant vigilance. Words that carry the weight of history to Tacitus or Seneca mean something absurdly different to a modern Roman.
It's such a weird linguistic accident.
But a profound reminder to always question your translation of the world, because the linguistic ground is constantly shifting beneath your feet.
So we have a society that is deeply cynical about bad art and obsessive writers. They are building complex logical systems to unearth hidden motives and regulate their markets. And they're doing all of this while wrestling with a language that is inherently slippery.
Right.
Why? What was driving this immense effort to structure their reality and call out human flaws?
If we connect all these disparate phrases to the bigger picture, it ultimately comes down to the ticking clock.
Mortality.
Yes. The foundational reason the ancients were so obsessed with establishing truth and securing a legacy is that they were acutely, painfully aware of their own mortality. Time was their ultimate constraint.
Which leads us to arguably the most famous phrase on the entire Wikipedia list. Carpe diem, from Horace's Odes.
Seize the day. It is ubiquitous today, but the common translation strips away the vital texture of the original Latin.
How so?
While the verb carpere does not mean seize in a militaristic, aggressive, or conquering sense, it refers specifically to the plucking of flowers or fruit.
Wow, that distinction completely changes the philosophy of the phrase. When we say seize the day now, it feels tied to modern hustle culture.
Right, the grind set.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to go out and conquer your to-do list or do something reckless like the modern YOLO, you only live once. So what does this all mean for the plucking metaphor then?
Well, think about picking an apple off a tree.
Okay, it's less like conquering a battlefield and more like having a concert ticket for tonight. You cannot save the ticket for next week. You either use it the moment the doors open, or it becomes completely worthless. The same goes for picking a ripe piece of fruit from a branch. You are forced to consume it right now, because the present moment is highly perishable. It will spoil.
That is a highly accurate way to interpret Horace's intent. You aren't dominating time. You are simply enjoying its fruits before they inevitably decay. The list reinforces this exact sentiment with another phrase, attributed to Ausonius or Virgil. College Virgo roses.
Kick girl the roses. A very direct exhortation to enjoy youth and beauty before they fade.
And we see how people adapted this core philosophy to highly specific, sometimes absurd situations. It wasn't just about the day. The list includes carpe vinum.
Seize the wine. A sentiment I think we can all relate to at the end of a long week.
Definitely. We also see carpe noctem, seize the night. This was historically utilized when carpe diem simply didn't fit the activity at hand.
Like what kind of activities?
Well, for instance, astronomers use it as a rallying cry to make the most of a clear sky. There is an astronomical challenge called a Messier Marathon, where observers try to spot a massive, specific catalog of deep sky objects in a single night.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, you can't seize the day for that. You have to carpe noctem.
It is all about making the immediate moment count, whatever that moment demands. But reading further down the list, the tone regarding mortality shifts drastically. It wasn't entirely focused on picking roses and drinking wine.
No, not at all. There was a deeply fatalistic undercurrent in their worldview that we cannot ignore. Consider the phrase derived from the biblical book of Isaiah and cited by John Chrysostom.
Comedamus et bibemus, cras enim morimur.
Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die.
Yeah.
That hits the air completely differently than carpe diem. Carpe diem is rooted in the appreciation of beauty. Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die feels like, well, surrender. It's the attitude of, well, the ship is sinking, so we might as well raid the buffet on the way down.
It reflects the stark, unforgiving reality of the ancient world. You could not outmaneuver death. This helplessness is hammered home by a phrase originating from medieval medicinal texts. Contravim mortis non crescit herba in hortus.
No herb grows in the gardens against the power of death.
Imagine the psychological weight of being an ancient or medieval physician. You possess all this specialized knowledge, you cultivate these complex gardens of medicinal herbs, but ultimately you are powerless.
Right.
There is no biological cure for mortality. This fatalistic reality perfectly balances the joy of carpe diem. They weren't plucking the roses just because they enjoyed horticulture. They were plucking them because they were staring directly into the void, knowing with absolute certainty that the garden would not save them in the end.
That context adds such incredible depth to this entire deep dive. I mean, we started with a simple alphabetical Wikipedia list of Latin phrases, starting with C, and it took us on a massive journey.
It really did.
We saw snarky art critics roasting masterful paintings with Cacatum non est pictum, and we watched the ancient version of the Peter principle play out with Galba.
We explored the mechanics of human logic, detailing how to isolate motives with cui bono and how the law of forced market balance with caveat venditor, all while navigating the bizarre phonetic traps of black dogs eating beautiful peaches.
And finally, we arrived at the profound, highly perishable nature of time. It really proves that these are not just dusty words from a dead language. They are a mirror reflecting exactly who we are.
The technological dressing has changed, but the core human condition, our flaws, our logic, our mortality, hasn't shifted an inch in 2,000 years.
So, to you listening right now, whether you are actively trying to avoid a shady online transaction and practicing your caveat emptor, or maybe you are fighting the urge to post a 6-paragraph rant on social media that you really shouldn't send, battling your own Cacoethes scribendi,
We've all been there.
or maybe you just plan to go home tonight, carpe diem, and enjoy a great glass of wine. Just remember that you are participating in a beautifully messy human tradition that spans millennia.
You are operating within a very long, very familiar lineage.
But before we wrap up this dip dive, I want to leave you with one final thought from the source material. We didn't get to explore it during the main discussion, but the text outlines a concept called circulus viciosus, which in logic is a vicious circle, or in science, a positive feedback loop.
Right. It is closely related to another phrase on the list, circulus in probando.
Which translates to circular reasoning.
Exactly. It describes an argument or closed-loop process that just feeds endlessly on itself, going around and around without ever breaking out to find an external truth.
Now, combine that concept with Juvenal's Cacoethes scribendi, that incurable, malignant desire to constantly write, document, and post every thought we have.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Given humanity's modern obsession with churning out endless content, are we today trapping ourselves in a massive digital circulus improbando? Are we stuck in a vicious circle where we just consume information that merely references other information, scrolling endlessly through feeds without ever actually looking up from our screens to carpe diem and pluck the fruit that is right in front of us?